Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is a follow-up to a video that I released a couple of days ago about why non-human intelligence is in contact with us as humanity, especially in regards to physical contact. And the reason that I am recording this today is because there have been emails and messages from the late researcher Amy Eskridge that have been kind of going around on social media. And she famously researched anti-gravity technology, but she, I suppose, in private conversations, was talking to one of her colleagues or one of her friends about why aliens, why specifically Greys, are in contact with us and kind of what they're doing here, why they might be here. So since this perfectly and exactly ties into what I had just been talking about, I figured that I would kind of read through the messages that she sent to her friend and kind of give my opinion on what I think might be going on. So if anybody is not familiar with Amy Eskridge, she passed away in June 2022, and she was 34 years old. And so I'll just kind of read some of kind of the bullet points from her obituary. So she was the chairwoman and president of the Institute for Exotic Science in Huntsville, Alabama. And she studied electrical engineering, chemistry, physics, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology. So even though she was like this completely well-rounded person, very intelligent, she was known for kind of working on UAPs and UFOs and kind of how they propel themselves. And so she has been widely discussed, especially over the past few years, amongst people that are kind of in the UFO, UAP experiencer community, just because she passed away due to kind of strange circumstances. So she was filmed in a Zoom call with her friend, and I don't believe that she knew that she was being filmed, but she was talking about how she believes that she was a target and that because of the research she was carrying out, that she felt like people were watching her and that something might happen to her, even though that she would never harm herself. And so in this long chat, she was talking about how she knew that there was just a lot that she was focusing on that perhaps people in intelligence agencies or just anybody related to kind of like the UFO, UAP, alien community, like just there were people that didn't want her information kind of getting out to the public. And so she also sent messages to one of her friends kind of showing like how she had been harmed, and she had picture of like this window where I guess like she believed that she was being monitored through this window and it had blinds over it, and the blinds were kind of turned up so somebody could still see in. And she believed that there was some kind of device used by somebody monitoring her in order to harm her with radiation. And so she showed that these blinds had partially melted or like almost like vaporized onto the window. And then she had a picture that she had taken of her hands, and her hands were bright red, just from like the wrists up, like to the tips of her fingers. And she was saying that like based on the angle of like how this type of like radiation device might have been coming in, like it seemed like they would just have directly hit her hands while she was working on her laptop. And so she did end up passing away at that young age of mysterious circumstances. It has been ruled that she harmed herself, but a lot of us don't believe that. And so these new messages, or new to us, have come out, written to her friend or colleague Frank Milburn, and I'll just quickly read kind of like what he is known for or who he is. So Frank was a former UK military intelligence officer. He was a UAP researcher and the author of the Pentagon's UAP Task Force. So I believe that she reached out to Frank in order to kind of give her thoughts on what's going on with Greys and in their contact, because it might still have been a little bit too strange to talk about these types of topics with somebody that maybe only focused on anti-gravity research or only focused on nanotech or just any kind of like really more academic type of physics or chemistry type of science background. And so in one of her messages to Frank, this was from Signal in October 2021, she mentioned, "I told you the cataclysm was in 7 years. That would be 2028, like he just said." And so we're not sure who she's talking about here, but she believes that there's going to be some type of major event, worldwide event, that is going to affect the Earth. And so this is getting into kind of a lot of messages that experiencers have received and lore of experiencers and contactees and abductees. But a lot of people have had contact with, quote, aliens, and these aliens have told them that there are going to be major Earth changes and that major problems are going to happen to the Earth. And so There have been like children at the Ariel school incident that were told like all of these changes would be happening and they were not good, and a lot of people have like believed that that's due to global warming. Um, but since then, people are not only getting messages about the Earth changing due to warming, they're also getting messages about like a great solar flash or a pole flip or pole shift, just creating major cataclysm of forests being gone, tsunamis happening, volcanoes really exploding, and um, earthquakes happening all over the place. And just even recently, we have been kind of seeing that these earthquakes are happening more frequently and at higher magnitudes. So I don't know if this is leading up to the 2027 date that a lot of people believe in, or 2028, as Amy has mentioned here. But there is a lot happening, and the actual geographic North Pole or the poles are rapidly racing across the Earth. Like where you would think that the North Pole is, that's geographically not where it's located. It's much farther east as an American than like what we would think. And so also on top of that, just because I'm kind of getting into like what's going on with Earth changes, and this ties into Amy's theory. Um, it's also worth mentioning that the upper atmosphere, like the upper stratosphere of the Earth, is kind of mostly gone. And so what would typically block out a lot of the really awful cancer-causing or carcinogenic UV rays, like just kind of like space radiation, that upper kind of stratosphere is mostly gone. I think it's 70 or even maybe more than 80% gone at this point. So that's letting in like just a lot of sunlight and radiation that back when I was a child in the 80s and 90s that we just weren't exposed to. And it also explains kind of like why the sun looks white now instead of golden, just because that kind of atmosphere isn't there anymore. It could also explain why there are these kind of trails being left by planes in the sky on purpose and this kind of spraying in the sky. It's meant to mitigate the radiation and the warming that is happening from all of that radiation now coming down and hitting the Earth that didn't used to. And so, because these major Earth changes are happening, a lot of people believe that is why grays, mantids, aliens in general are in contact with us if they are here in a really physical sense. Um, and so, I will just kind of get into it's kind of long email that she sent to Frank, but I'll read like kind of like the middle chunk of what Amy thought was going on, and how this ties into quote like the cataclysm that she spoke about. So she said, the Greys are from the future. They evolved after the cataclysm and want to ensure their future existence, okay? Another earlier faction of travelers would prefer for us all to stay human by preventing this cataclysm, okay? But what is the why that has generated this whole situation? The atmosphere gets royally fucked up in the future and creates an evolutionary divergence. Some would like this divergence to continue to occur, and some would like to stop it. But the cause that generates this divergence is the atmosphere getting fucked up, and how the chemistry of the new atmosphere interacts with our bodies to cause us to change. That either happening or not happening is what matters most to the Greys. And that's an issue of chemistry and biology, not so much physics. So, the biggest issue on our minds shouldn't necessarily be trying to figure out the technology behind the craft. That's important, but still missing the point. If the Greys had strategic targets that they'd like to travel back in time to ice well in advance, it wouldn't necessarily be targets who were into physics. It would more likely be targets who understand climate science and biology and all the other critical elements of the cataclysm that caused the Greys to either evolve into themselves or not. The people who might know how to reverse or prevent atmospheric catastrophe or how to harden our bodies against it and survive it, etc. Whether the cause of the atmospheric cataclysm is caused by an asteroid or something else, it all comes down to the chemistry of what we breathe and how it interacts with our bodies to either evolve the survivors into the Greys or not. None of which is related to the propulsion tech of the UAPs. That is a secondary distraction. We have up until now failed ourselves by super epically missing the point. My local anecdote about dead scientists who were laid off by a NASA MSFC biology department, only to be massacred years later, is an example of this. A timeline war is surely a great example of, quote, unconventional warfare. This particular type of unconventional warfare includes future information that allows you to take out targets many years before their individual relevance to the conflict is able to become obvious. Anyone who wants to understand the motivations and objectives of this particular timeline war just needs to Google, quote, dead scientists and figure out what they all have in common. There actually is a great website that has been diligently recording mysterious deaths of scientists going back to cases 20 years or longer ago. And a plot twist, most of these dead scientists aren't physicists, although some of them are. But a complete list of mysteriously dead scientists includes biologists, climatologists, virologists, chemists, material scientists, agricultural scientists, etc., etc., killed by random drive-by shootings, cars exploding, sudden unexplained illnesses that kill them within a matter of days, home entries where nothing is stolen but they end up dead anyway, getting hit by a car as they walk down the sidewalk, disappearing and being found in the river, etc., etc., etc. Most of them told someone that they were scared shortly before they died of these random events of violence. None of these cases are provably traced back to international assassination due to a clean getaway or lack of evidence. Future information certainly helps you figure out how to get away with it. But it seems like scientists tend to die of random acts of violence more often than the general population, and the dead are not all UAP physicists. In fact, most of them aren't. Many of them are people like the former NASA biology personnel who became professors at UAH only to get freaking massacred as a group years later. So that is Amy Eskridge's take on what is going on and why so many scientists have been missing and killed recently, why she personally was killed. So a couple of days ago, I had released a video about this kind of exact topic that Amy was talking to her friend Frank about. And so, as you could tell by what Amy had written, she believed in the kind of like the future humans theory, that eventually humanity would turn into grays. And so when I was talking about like why aliens or non-human intelligence is in contact with us physically, I kind of wondered, is it because they want to benefit humanity, like humans as they exist today, and kind of evolve and improve the lineage of us? Or do they want to improve the bodies and hardiness of the gray body if they come from kind of a different place or a different dimension or a different time, that needs to acclimate to kind of the world that we have now? And based on kind of like what Amy was saying to her friend, it sounds like there's like a melding, because if humans are grays, then it's like whatever they are doing for the human body benefit, um, it eventually will benefit them as they evolve and continue to kind of turn into what they are, which is kind of like these lanky, skinny, really tall beings with long necks and long arms and all that. And so it seems like Amy believes that there's this huge cataclysm that's going to happen. And again, it possibly ties into kind of what's going on with the atmosphere right now. And these grays are kind of tampering with timelines. They're tampering with what is currently happening now, and seeing like what will happen if X, Y, and Z happens. And if they don't like that, and if they don't like how it will affect how humans evolve into grays, like they will go back in time and then they will change it. And she had mentioned in a different message to Frank that, like, just based on how kind of time travel works or how the grays are interacting with us, they kind of can't go into the future, is kind of like, it sounded like what she was saying. It's like they can go back and they can tamper with the past, but there's something about not going into the future and not being able to touch that. So I don't know if it's something going on with how they interact with us. They tinker a little bit and they see how it affects them in their current timeline. And if like, oh, that's not right, they'll go back to the past again and they'll change it again and kind of try to affect us and try to affect kind of the climate itself. So I haven't heard too many people talking about there being kind of future travelers going back and trying to change a major global kind of catastrophe. But obviously, there's many people that have talked about how humans are changed and kind of bred with these kind of future grays in order to um, live a more sustainable existence, I suppose. And this also, I would say, this is up for like a lot of controversy, and it's quite a quote conspiracy. But this also slightly ties into like the Project Looking Glass kind of claims that came out, and that was from the whistleblower Bill Wood, and he mentioned that there was going to be kind of like this cosmic event that happened. So he didn't say solar flash, but it could be something related to a star or the sun or just radiation, something coming from outer space and affecting our Earth. And he said that from what he saw from this quantum computer that was, I believe in Iraq, he said this quantum computer showed all different timelines and showed how all different types of things would play out. And he said no matter how many simulations were run, no matter how many different kind of changes were made to past events, it's like this cosmic event could not be avoided. Whatever this major kind of impacting force was, it's just there's nothing we can do. It's not in our capacity to affect it. And he said that like kind of the after effects of that would be more kind of like awakening, ascension, spiritual nature, where people would just know all, like they would know the truth of everything. And it's like, obviously, in the world that we live in right now, our media and our leaders and our textbooks and our education about history, it's like it's so filled with lies and so filled with omissions that we're not even aware of, like, what used to happen on the earth, like how life actually exists, like different science that actually exists that is now classified. And it just seemed like this whistleblower was saying that once this cosmic event happens, like, we're just going to know everything. And so it's interesting that Amy Eskridge was talking about, like, these grays are perhaps like looking back at how can we affect the cataclysm, but it just seems like there's no way that you really could. I mean, if there was something happening with radiation, stars, and our sun, um, there's nothing that, like, an entire culture could do in order to just stop that from occurring. So it seems like, yeah, the grays are personally affecting scientists, working with our officials and our intelligence agencies to affect kind of the science that is currently happening in order to carry out the type of science hybridization, kind of world changes that they want to have carried out. So it's all just, it's pretty confusing once you start to get into timelines. It's this little tiny thing affects everything else. It's like the butterfly effect. It's, you take this one person out of the world and then everything else shifts and all these things don't happen. Or maybe one of these future humans or grays, or just somebody comes in having seen the future and they kind of plant future information into the past, and maybe a scientist is making a discovery that they otherwise wouldn't have known, and that affects everything. But it seems like there is something going on with the future and some major future change, which is kind of accounting for why we're in contact with grays physically at all, or in contact with any kind of non-human intelligence at all. Otherwise, when it comes to awakening and ascension and all of that, it seems like these spiritual beings that come to us, like, they don't really get involved with the body unless it's for healing and just because they want us to feel better and they care about us. And so I have contact with physical grays, and I have contact with, like, these light beings that show up in my house outside, these light orbs that are outside of my home. And so, again, just to quickly reiterate, it's like, I feel like they're all kind of collectively aware of each other. They're working together in some respects, but these physical beings, like, whatever it is that they are doing, it has like a very different motive than whatever is happening when we have contact that is telepathic, that is kind of like more ethereal in nature. And it's all just, it's very confusing. I cannot wrap my head around it. I don't know enough about quantum physics. I don't know enough about future timelines and time travel in order to even begin to say what I think is going on. But it's an absolute shame that it seems like Amy Eskridge was somebody that knew what was going on, and she might have had answers to some of this, and she was taken out of this world because there were certain people that didn't want her to talk about this. Um, yeah, it's a lot. It's heavy. It's hard to think about this and what's going on, and just kind of how much ruthlessness and evil there is in the world. And um, like, who does it really benefit? I don't know if it benefits us as humanity, or if it benefits God knows what. Like, I really don't know. It's all really confusing. Um, yeah, if you have any thoughts on what Amy has said, or if you have any different way of interpreting it, you might. um, and like, you could leave that down below in the comments to just kind of give me a better handle and grip on, like what she thought was going on, and just why so many people were being kind of removed from existence just because of the work that they were doing. Um, kind of makes it seem like grays in particular are not the nicest, not the most benevolent beings. But at the same time, it's like, if there was a higher reason from a higher power, and this was going to massively positively affect kind of existence, and humanity existing in the future, then I guess it would make sense that they're doing what they're doing, and it's kind of affecting some for the benefit of the whole. And that gets into a whole bunch of morality, and logic kind of scenarios that I won't get into today, but it's all really messy. Yeah. So I think I will leave it there today. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.